So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gonzag, and together with Raul and Yuvarat from Freshworks, I welcome you to this webinar. So today we have planned for 45 to 60 minutes presentation as well as Q&A sessions to discuss of ITIL in time of crisis and more specifically about IT service continuity management, ITSCM. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat room. There's Zoom has this chat functionality. Yes, thank you. And or in the Q&A box that is also available on Zoom. So before we start, if you could just write down which city you are joining this seminar and whether you are working from home or for work. So just a quick questions from all of you to put in the chat. If you can say, I'm coming from this country, this city, and if you are from home and from work. So for me, I'm from Bangkok, and working from home. So we've got people from the Philippines, Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia. Oh, for which we had somebody from Vietnam, and looks like most of us are actually working from home right now. Cebu. So we've got people from Philippines again. Oh, we've got one person from Qatar and working from office. Good. Welcome, Nisa, to this webinar. Got Malaysia as well. So let me start with the presentations. So today we have two speakers. So we will have myself, Gonzag, and Rahul will join us later in a few minutes after I've done my parts. So I work for a company called PPP Partners, and Rahul is from Freshworks. We have two speakers. So this is roughly my profile. So I have expertise in service management, agile, DevOps, IoT, and I do consulting training as well as coaching. You can find my profile on LinkedIn, and you have my email if you later on wants to contact me. So I'm originally from France. You can see the Eiffel Tower, but I've been working in Southeast Asia for the past 25 years. So I've been to most of your country, in the regions, in your cities, with my different company. I work for Microsoft. I work for Computer Associates, and now I have my own company. So I'm a trainer, and I'm certified on a few IT best practice. So ITIL, version 3, version 4. I'm ongoing to be a DevOps coach. I've got COVID training as well as the change manager certification. So that's roughly my background. In Bangkok, I organized this IT service management meetup. So before I was trying to do this face-to-face, so now we moved to online delivery. And on a monthly basis, we try to discuss about technology, skill sets, people, experience, and any other topics related to service management. So, and that's why I'm continuing this with Freshworks, because I find it's sharing experience is something that is important to us, to all of us. So this is the agenda for this afternoon. We'll talk about crisis, and I will mainly share my experience in a few crisis situations that I've been here. We see the role of IT in terms of whether we need the level of preparations we need to have, and also what we can learn from this. And then I will, after hand over to Raul, will give us his perspective from Freshworks. And then after we can continue with Q&A sessions at the end, okay? So feel free, as I say, to put questions in the chat and the Q&A sessions. So I had prepared some polling questions, which I will share with you regarding a centralized service desk, because this is something that is key. And I'm launching the poll. And the question here is, do you have a centralized service desk in your organizations? Because this, in time of crisis, this is something that is critical for the organizations, right? Where basically employee, and not just employee, it could be employee, it could be a contractor, it could be even customer, could contact the organizations to get some form of support, to get some form of information. Because when we don't have this centralized service desk, or as we say in IT, the single point of contact, then people scramble around to find who to contact or where to get the information. Okay, so I'll give you I'll leave you a few more minutes to a few seconds to vote. I've got half of the people voting. So talking about organizations that I have had a chance to work with, some they didn't have service desks, some they had one service desk, some they had multiple service desks, okay? Where it was difficult to know who actually to contact because there was too many service desks in the organizations. Okay, so we've got 63% who voted. I'll give you 20 more seconds to vote, and I will hand the poll there. And it's quite interesting, the result, because this is not what I was expecting. Okay, so end the poll. So we've got 60, and I will share the results to you. And so what we have is that we have only 60% have a centralized service desk in their organizations. And I'm surprised that I thought this will be much higher than this. And so that means that there are organizations that still don't have in place this infrastructure for centralized support. Okay, good. And I think I had another poll for you. Yes, that's this one. And the second question that I had was, during this time of crisis, did you have to contact your service desk for support? Okay, so we'll discuss the crisis situations, and it's just to see that in this time, did you have the chance, did you have the opportunity, or did the service desk was used as a mechanism to either to get information or to get support during this crisis? Again, I will share my experience in a couple of slides in different type of scenario where the service desk was used in this kind of context. So I will wait for the majority to vote. So please select whether you had to contact them or not. And I can share with you one of my experience where this was when I was in Microsoft. My access card was disabled, and I was in Singapore, and I had to go inside the building late at night. and there was no way I could actually open the door. And I had to contact the security team who could see me through the video camera. So I confirmed my identity. They then could confirm that effectively I was Gonzague and I was effectively an employee and that I could access the door. And they remotely opened the doors to the building so that I could actually go in and take my laptop so I could continue to work. I could just an example of when things go right. So I will end the poll. Okay, so we have 60, I need to share. So we have 65 people that made a contact, which is so mainly probably to enable remote work and so on. And so there's still room for improvement there. Good, thank you for this. So I will stop the poll. And I will start by my first crisis, and that was almost now 17 years ago or 18 years ago, depending on when we consider it started. So this was with the SARS epidemic. So if you are familiar with this, it mainly touched China, Singapore, and Canada. These were the countries that were most affected. Number of days and cases is much lower than what we have currently. But already at that time, there was already some impact. So in terms of traveling, so my company decided to stop traveling for a couple of weeks, and we had to move to all on online meetings for overseas travel. And I only had one or two customers where we had to have some, put in place some specific measure. We had a project with a hospital, and one of them was managing the SARS patient, so we could not go inside the hospital. But beside this, there was only, so at that time I was in Singapore and people were just taking temperature and that was about. So there was some impact, but I will say it was not too, didn't really, the impact was not too much. But already we could see that how it was important to be able to have some form of communications, remote communications with a different team. The second one is if you are familiar in Thailand, it's now 9 years ago, there was a big flooding that basically stopped the city of working, at least part of the city. So at that time I was I was traveling in the US. I was not sure I could come back to Thailand because of the flooding. I managed to, and the airport was still open, so we was able to land. What you see here, this is the old airport, so the Dongmyong airport, and they had about 1 to 2 meters of water, right? So here the impact was mainly for the staff. So some of them, their house were flooded, or there was no route for people to actually to go to the office or to see a customer. So here there was, the question was safety of the staff. So in my company at that time, we put in place some measure that if the staff house were going to be flooded, we will relocate them in different hotel outside Bangkok or inside Bangkok. So on a regular basis, we had to keep track of how the flooding was evolving, whether the water was going up or down, and if people were ready to relocate. So here you can see the importance of having a central point of contacts to collect all of these informations, right? What else did we do on this one? That's yeah, the first actions was actually to send back all the foreigner who were on project in Bangkok and to get them back to their location. So typically it was either Singapore or Philippines. So to avoid any issue. Still Bangkok, if you follow Thai politics, there have been a lot of movement. I won't comment on the political side, but we basically in 2004, 2014, there have been some demonstrations. Some have been violent, but it was very localized. So, for example, I know if you were not part of this small square where there was been some fighting, you won't know about it, right? There was no real safety issues outside those zones. What you see is one of the commercial center that actually, unfortunately, was burned down. And here I've put this picture because just in front of this building, there was one of my customers. And the customer had all of his IT departments opposite this building. And during all of this time, they could not go inside their building. So this means that the all IT departments had to relocate in a different locations. And because they didn't add a plan in place, they had to start from scratch their business continuity plan, meaning they had to find a new place, renting a couple of floors. They had to buy furniture, they had to buy equipment, and they had to buy the reinstall. Basically moved in emergency their IT departments to different locations. And this cost them a lot of money, and it took quite some time because they were not prepared for this. So they didn't have a business continuity plan for IT. And this is one of the lessons that they learned from this, okay? And after 2014, so 2015 and 16, a lot of companies actually took this opportunity to revisit their business continuity plan and their IT service continuity management plan, okay? Because they really learn from this. So this is some of my experience. So I started working in Thailand in a bank, and bank it's a requirements both from the head office but also the regulator. You need to have a disaster continuity plan. Okay, so on a yearly basis, I will have a BCP exercise where in less than 14 hours, I will have to be able to rebuild a certain portions of the IT infrastructure in a different locations. So it will be in a different data center, away from the first building. So in our case, it was 10 kilometers away, and I will have to have X number of staffs ready to work after 12 hours, 24 hours, and 48 hours. Okay, so that was our business continuity plan, and I was doing this exercise on a yearly basis. So on a yearly basis, I had to go through the whole exercise to see whether we were ready for this. So now let's talk about today. So today, we all most of us are currently working from home. Obviously the technology have changed so that it make it us easy to do this. But for the past couple of months, more than weeks or months, we all have been affected by the coronavirus. So depending on your country, some of the restrictions and some of the consequences may have come at a different time. But basically, in February, March, we were all kind of more or less affected. And the main one is international travel. So people cannot work, and I still have people that cannot come back to Thailand, for example. So for people who work across the regions, this has a big impact. And then after, there's been lockdown in different part of the world. So Bangkok, we are not too much affected. The lockdown has been, I would say, it's a really soft lockdown. I have friends in Manila, and this is different. Friend in Singapore, so it's different. So different country, different city, the impact is really can vary greatly. But the thing is, there are some of the measures that has been in place. you cannot travel. In some cases, you cannot hold meeting in your with your organizations. We mostly work from home. So these are the impact on our organizations. Okay, so the consequences is that now most of us, we have remote meetings, we work from home if it's possible. But one of the challenges is how ready were our organizations to do this? Because most of the organizations that I've seen, they were ready for maybe 20 or 30% of their staff to work from home, but they never planned for 100% working from home. So in their business continuity plan and IT service continuity management plan, they didn't have this scenario in place, right? Where everybody will be working outside of their organizations, and that puts the different type of challenge. One is an IT challenge. Now we need to enable people. So people might be may have laptop or may not have laptop. They may have desktop at home. They may have internet, or they may not have internet. So the quality of internet might be different. And then after the question is that if we enable people working from home in their own equipment, what about security? So you can see all of the consequences of trying to get people to work from home. It's not that easy if it was not planned. Okay. So in my case, I've been a consultant for many years working from home, and I'm very comfortable with all of the different equipments, different solutions, and I've used the cloud for many years. So I'm very familiar with it. Some people are not familiar with this. So there was not only a challenge in how the technology could be deployed, but also to get people to use the technology from home. That's there's two things. There's also the people aspect on this. Okay, so next thing is that this is going to last. Okay, with the situation is improving depending on your country. Like for example, in Bangkok, the business is slowly restarting. We are starting to have meetings. The hotel will reopen soon. So it's not over, but at least in some countries it's getting better, and I hope in your country it's getting better. But some of the businesses has really been impacted. Okay, if you work in the airline industry, in the tourism industry, so whether it's hotel, transports, e-commerce, and all of this, your business has been impacted, and also maybe your partner's business has been impacted. So you can see from a business risk perspective, it's not just you, it's also you are dependent on partner. And if your partners is going bankrupt, this will have an effect on your business as well. So what's the role of IT into this? So we had a few pointers there, but one is it always starts with the BCP, so the business continuity plan. So the business needs to start with identifying, make a list of all the possible risk that they have, right? That they foresee that, okay, within our business, these are the things that will happen. So when I was in the bank, the type of things we'll plan is, okay, what happens if the buildings burn, right? So, well, if the building burns, we need to be able to relocate in X number of days most of the staff. So we need to have an alternate data center, alternate locations, being able to provision the hardware and software and put this in place very, very quickly. So this is both the company, but also the regulator on for doing this, right? And then based on the business continuity plan, you map what is required from an IT perspective, okay? And you can look at it from a different perspective where you will also look, okay, what if there's a major IT incident? Like for example, if an impact in your data center, right? Data center burn. Okay, what's your recovery plan? And to see what will be the impacts to the business. So we talk about disaster recovery, but also a business impact analysis to understand what will be the impact to the business. Okay, so here that's really, there's an incident, there's a major crisis, how this will impact the business and how the IT is going to be able to support this. And here, right now, what we have is that we need to enable remote work, right? And IT was probably not ready for having so many people doing remote work, right? The other thing is that how about supporting the staff right now? So it's no longer just an IT support. It's also it's a people support, right? How to make sure that, for example, if somebody gets sick, if somebody needs to be quarantined, okay, what will be the role of IT in ensuring the proper tracking, ensuring the proper support for their staff? And I know some organizations that put this very successfully in place, right? So they will ensure, for example, that they will ask you, for example, to keep track of, okay, what's your temperature morning, evening, right? Just to ensure that you are doing well. I know some organizations that have had to rearrange their schedule because they had different team, a team for the morning and a team in the afternoons, to make sure that people don't, that if a team gets infected, only half of the team will be impacted, not everyone. So this is part of risk management. So in IT service continuity management, I mentioned that this needs to start from the business. So we start with the BCP, and then after we'll go to the IT. And I think that out of this whole crisis, there will be a lot of lessons to be learned, right? There's a lot of things that could have been prepared much better. And this is an opportunity not to blame the organizations, but to sit down and say, okay, next time, what can we do better, right? And this is where risk management will come in. So people will have to look into, okay, here are the typical risks that we should be looking at, okay? What are those that are likely to affect us? And then what can we put in place to avoid or actually to minimize the impact on those risks, and when we should be putting this in place, right? You cannot cover all of the risks, so you have to make some selections. You have to do some priorities into your risk, okay? And that will lead to what I called service improvement plan. That is something that is going to be for the next couple of years, right? You will say, okay, out of these 10 items that we identified, these are the 3 that we will be able to do this year, right? So for example, if people didn't have the mobility in terms of equipment, well, maybe it's time to think that we should move people from desktop to laptop, right? I know a lot of organizations that didn't have a work from home policy. Well, for sure, I foresee that organizations will be thinking about this for 2 reasons. One is that because like this, they will be more prepared for the next wave, if there is any, but also because people have realized some of the advantage of working from home. So I've been talking to organizations where they realize that people were more productive during this time, okay? So there's also some lesson learned here, right? And together with the continuous service improvement, there's also reviewing our contracts and our supplier. Okay, because I'm sure the suppliers will have been impacted. What level of risk does that brings to organizations? Okay, so that's what I wanted to share with you on this. So next, I'll let Raul to take over and give maybe a more practical view on how Freshworks see this in the BCP and give us some example. So Raul, hand over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gonzague. Probably let me go ahead and share with you my screen.
Yeah.
Yep.
Can you share or need to stop to share?
Yep. So
Okay. So you have put the poll, right? Yeah, so that's another good questions that we had is what is the mechanisms to contact the service desk? And it's quite interesting. Wait a few seconds until Raul get his screen.
yes, yes, Gonzaga. I mean, I just shared with you my screen. Is it better? Are you able to see the screen now?
Yeah, I can see the screen, yeah.
All good. Yep. Perfect. So I think so. We have a poll running right now, and is the poll good? Have we completed the poll?
Yeah, I think most of the people have
Responding here.
yeah, responding, and they can actually see this now.
All right.
So what we had is quite interesting. So we had not many people through the telephone, but to contact the service desk, which is which has been a trend for a long time. We see a lot of people, 40% with email and email and instant messaging, so line messenger. So we'll have a lot of this is quite interesting, and not many people with the web and intranet. I would have expected this to be higher. So it's interesting there.
Yep.
Good.
Awesome. And email being the highest is also expected, right? So at least that's a traditional channel of.
Yeah, traditional. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. I think the poll is good, right? So it's 68 people who have voted it. Are we still waiting for people to vote? Awesome. Yep. I think let's get started. Perfect. So as you see in the screen, right? So the major topics that we're going to cover for the day and the next part of the webinar is going to be how in a practical real-time world, how ensuring business continuity with a scalable IT service management and the different aspects of it would be covered. And the three broad topics that I would be covering would be how BCP during pandemics would really work, right? So BCP as a concept, as a practice, again ensures business continuity, but how it's getting different for pandemics and what are the different items that have to be considered when it is be pandemics. Next is the new normal is again working from home. People are getting used to working from home, although some places lockdown has been open, people are being starting to go to office, but having many people working from home, so how to make work from home scalable. And the third one is the real challenge, the real practical challenge is how on a real-time world on how asset management could be done and what are the major concerns when it's going to be asset management when it's going to be on remote working. So these going to be the major three topics or the broad topics that I want to cover. Right, let me get into the topics. Right, so ensuring business continuity at scale. So how is business continuity plan during pandemics would be done, right? Uh, so Probably I had a chance to again work or sit and do a binge session in my Netflix series. So I had a chance to look at one of the series where which speaks about health and human. The series name is called as Designated Survivor, where in the series, so the health and human secretary, who's the Kurtman of a place, right? So of California is basically being based out of a remote location, and that's to ensure that when the entire state or when the entire place is gonna be in a disaster or it's gonna be on an emergency. Now they wanted the people who are actually having the parliament or actually having the entire governance should be taking place out of the disaster place, right? So there should be some kind of a governance, there could be some kind of a plan which has been designated from a person who has not been affected due to the situation. So the entire series it's invented in such a way that the secretary took the president's place and was able to form his own new government, his own new Congress, and the NCA presidency has been made all from scratch. And I think we are in a similar situation, right? So everything started in one part of the world where we never expected it to be again affecting the entire world, right? So uh, it's been again extended to the entire world, and we are now having in the same crisis, right? So one of the common points that I want to cover when BCP during pandemics is that, so BCP is not just about technology, and especially during pandemics, BCP is not just about technology. It covers all the three parts that you see in the screen over here. It covers people, it covers process, it covers technology, and technology is just a part of the entire pyramid, right? But yeah, obviously, it's IT team's responsibility and ownership to make sure that the technology is being delivered on time. But it also makes sure some drill downs to list of processes that you want to make changes, which I would be covering in the next part of the session. And it's also about people, right? So people are probably, as you can see, that people are not used to work from home as a mandatory business continuity plan, right? So certain organizations haven't even had work from home as policies, but I'm pretty sure, as Gonzag mentioned, that those organizations will continue to rethink or will at least put a pause, consider making work from home as policies, which will ensure people to again continue to do a business. But uh, but whenever you designate a BCP plan, we should always keep in mind that it's not just about technology, it's about people and it's about process also. Now, some of the or one of the major common parameters that you need to consider when it is going to be about defining your BCPs is that, so there are two major parameters. One is the scope of impact. Another one would be the scope of your affected services. All right. Now imagine there is a disaster in one of a specific location. For example, Chennai in India got affected probably due to a tsunami. Right. Now that scope of impact is it's very specific to a specific location of the entire organization. For example, organization could be multi-located and one part of the organization is affected. That will be a locale. Next is regional. Now probably let's take an impact of an earthquake where multiple locations got impacted, right? But it's just not to be a nation, but it's be multiple part of a nation got affected, especially in places which are prone to earthquakes, right? So those where the affected place or the crisis will be in a regional level, but not will be on a national or on a global level. National level, then we speak about it was one stage beyond where we are all right now. Probably if you could take China as an example, all the while we were thinking that as a country the country got affected, and in those times the impact of the crisis will be on a national level. So organizations which have multiple locations based out of multiple countries would probably be having their BCP focused only on a national level. But right now, what we are in is a global crisis, and it's a global medical crisis also, right? It's a medical disaster, and the scope of impact is going to be across globe. People connecting from different offices may need to communicate in different fashion. Everything has to be redesigned as per the global BCP, and that's how your BCP would again be differ based on the impact of it and based on the regional level, right? Next is the scope of affected services. Now, different services that you could also think of over here is one would be your facilities, right? So where most companies has their facilities based only out of their regional offices, right? And during, let's say, during crisis, during work from home situations, these facilities may not be even reachable. For example, the food that is being provided in an office spaces, or the working space that is being provided, and all these has to be reconsidered. Next is the computing infrastructure, especially during taking segments like BFSIs, banking, or fintech, right? So the kind of computing infrastructure which they give, for example, the teller machine, these are some things that cannot be brought to the work from home situations all this while. This cannot be made to brought to the hands of people, right? So the companies has to rethink on the kind of the infrastructure that is being provided. And another example of the affected services is network, right? We are never prone to situations where multiple people work from home, making use of the public internet, not use of the corporate internet that has been again allocated. So these are the common parameters, I think, which may need to be considered on a major level when your BCP is going to be at place, and when a future BCP is also being designated. And I think this is something, these are the common impact or common affected services that you may need to look at. Next is other parameters or other, let's say, list of line items that you need to consider when you're there in a BCP situation, is that it's really important for you to expect for a new normal, right? All this while, so working from home is the new normal, and people are multiple companies, multiple offices across different geographies are again getting used to this new normal, right? Everything is happening through remote sessions. People started to schedule meetings on calendars for every small interactions that they want to happen, and that's the new normal. Things until things return, until people most people start looking into working from office, right? So this would be the continuous situation, and it's not just any office. And other things that we also need to consider is other parts of the people, right? So people, not just employees, people not just customers, it also include vendors, it also include different partners, resellers, or let's say SIs who would also be providing services to your company. All that has to be considered, and that's one of the major things that you may need to consider, which is going to be the new normal, right? Next is look out for unavailable services. So some of the common mistakes that companies do is that people think that BCP is trying to like, let's say, BCP is trying to make sure the business is being back to normal state, or trying to make the business in the exact as usual state, right? But that's not exactly BCP is. BCP is at least to make sure that the business is being continuously running, is make sure that there's a continuity plan in place, right? So obviously there would be unavailable services. IT may not be functioning or continue to provide all the list of services that is being provided, at least considering the list of situations, which is also circling back to the point that we should also again identify the mission which is going to be which is very considered as critical, right? For example, your IT service desk could have been working in a different fashion. You would have had L1, L2 teams, L3 teams working on specialized or on expertise on different services. But having the new normal, providing different services, we may need to understand what is critical, deploy resources in those critical services, and then form a capacity on which could again cater towards your BCPs. Yep. And also one of the major part which I would suggest is to do tabletop exercises. All right. So what exactly is tabletop and how exactly tabletop exercises could help is that, so tabletop exercises is an exercise which is being carried out in a classroom environment probably, right? So where people sit or people connect each other, and they, during emergency situations, people redefine their roles, redefine their responsibilities, and they take ownerships from there. Now, given that your tabletop exercises cannot be done in a classroom environment, so we have all remote tools like Zoom, remote tools like let's say webinar sessions, or remote tools like Cisco's, where we could leverage these remote tools, do a tabletop exercise. Let's redefine how a team should work, how individuals' responsibility is being shared, and let's then bring it as a part of the BCP in which all this is being right now carried about. Right. Now, having spoken about BCPs, work from home had been part of the new normal right now, and how to make the work from home more scalable, right? So I had made a hack for it. How to make it scalable is that, so I had prepared a quick checklist which would suit most of the organizations when they are trying to make work from home a new scalable model, right? And as I mentioned, internet connectivity is one of the most important things, right? So most of the items is brought towards cloud, or at least towards the connecting to an on-premise system also would need an internet. So make sure that the company facilitates the employees is also having different internet connectivities, and also helps employees to have a strong internet. Next is safe and comfortable computing environment. Now, in the recent past, right? So we have also heard about the new terminology called as Zoom bombing, right? When companies started to use Zoom as one of the mediums for communicating to people, there are different hackers who also made use of the situation, trying to hack the Zoom meetings, create chaos, and to get the company's data. So it's always important to make sure, even in fact, Zoom for this case had introduced a lot of security policies which made sure that Zoom is more secure, Zoom is scalable, and other remote tools, other meeting tools are also being scalable, right? Enforcing a strong password policies, enforcing list of working environment, enforcing a list of waiting rooms before getting into a Zoom session also ensures safe and comfortable communities. Next is noise cancellation, right? Now, we were now, while working in work from home, we would be thanking God for the entire facilities that we had in our corporate offices, right? So we had a peaceful environment, we had meeting rooms, we had people working on silos, and people who doesn't make much noises, right? But probably, if you could think, while I take this webinar, we could have my pet dog barking. It's a Shih Tzu. It's barking on the right. So you could probably hear that. You could have people, my family people, speaking in the on some part of the other part of the room, right? So all this is prone to happen. So having probably a noise cancellation environment, or probably a noise cancellation headphone at least would help to a larger extent, where people could also have a peaceful environment. And one of the most major important thing is that people are not used to work from home, right? People come up with a lot of IT problems, VPN issues, a lot of virtual desktop issues, laptop not working, where in the traditional manner, people send out emails, or they directly walk into the IT teams and get help, which is not possible at this point of time. Now, that's where it really makes sense for you to make your IT services more reachable through channels like Slack, through MS Teams, through chat, through telephones, etc. Right? That really gives a confidence and a sense of security to the people who are actually being part of the environment, being part of work from home, and they feel really more productive and secure when there's IT service desk is at their back, right? And when the turnaround time is also being reduced, when people get responses, at least not resolutions, at least responses, they really feel that when the service desk is reachable, they really feel happy working from home. They really feel backed up when they work from home. And that's an important thing, I think, that lies within the ownership of IT teams. Also find backup suppliers, backup vendors who can also help you during situations, who can also help employees, probably in setting up a work environment within my home, right? I may need a new table, probably a comforting chair, right? And all this can be, again, either the company could bear it, or the company could at least facilitate the employees to, again, find out these vendors, find out quality vendors, and all that could be done. And we did it in Freshworks. We distributed a lot of internet dongles to our company employees just before the lockdown is being happened, just before people choose to work from home. We made sure that they have their internet dongles. We have their internet facilities all up. And VPN, right? So backup to VPN is, so you would have always, all this while people who are using VPN would have been very less, and it, it will just be the field people, or it will just be the people who are already been working from home. Now that most workforce have been working from home, you have a lot of let's say I would call a lot of requests for VPN, a lot of usage of VPN would also be there, and it also makes sure you also have a backup to the VPN. Now, this is a quick checklist. So this could be shared across employees, across organizations, which will make sure that work from home is also scalable. Right now, apart from this checklist, what also BCP challenges is that some of the things that we have never looked upon, right? Imagine, so all this while people would have been connecting towards the corporate Wi-Fi, corporate networks. Now, even the internet service providers wouldn't even be expecting such kind of a traffic with their environment. Now, what happened, what we followed in India and some parts of the Europe is that, some parts of APAC also is that, including vendors like Amazon Prime, Netflix, or in fact YouTube for that matter, made sure that the quality of the video which is being streamed is being reduced, right? Either earlier it used to be 1080 pixel, or it used to be 720 pixel, but right now it's been restricted to 480 pixels in mobiles and 720 pixels in the desktops and laptops, right? So that ensures that the bandwidth of the internet is consumed, or it's been made use in the right direction, that in certain initiatives which is being taken by the public companies, right? Now that is something which we haven't expected at all. And the next thing is that try to be more proactive, and let's also, as ITIL 4 suggests, right, let's also reiterate based on the feedback that we got. So it's also really important that, for at least in the near future, those who haven't done capacity planning are way ahead, really make sure that you, as a part of the BCP planning, capacity is also one of the major parameters that needs to be considered for the future, right? And especially during the pandemics. So, and it also makes sure that where exactly the focus should be and where exactly the focus not to be, right? So we can make sure certain services of IT has to be quality services. For example, the service desk, for example, the network services. So these are list of services where the focus has to be put in from the IT teams. And not just from the IT world, making one step, understanding the bigger picture, identifying core and the critical mission, not just of the IT team, but also based on the company, and allocating appropriate bandwidth. For example, now, as we already mentioned, VPN is something that will be used by most companies that you could see, right? So making sure that allocating proper bandwidth and resources is also important for those situations. Right. On the interest of time, let me also get into the asset management, which is one of the greater pain points that people are facing. And now, asset management, speaking more of asset management, what could also help, what two major topics is employee onboarding and employee offboarding, right? How this could be done in a BCP situation, how this could be done in a work from home situation. Now, we did it in Freshworks, that we, in the last 4 weeks, or in the last 5 weeks, where the major lockdown across globe happened, we onboarded close to 100 to 200 new employees, right? And it at ease. So we made sure that we shipped new laptops to them, we shipped new IT services to them. And even in places like India, where shipping was not possible, where it was a complete lockdown, where shipping industries didn't even perform our act, we made sure that we leverage virtual desktops. So onboarding new employees were at ease, because we asked employees to make use of their own laptops to connect to their virtual desktops. But the processors and the speed in which everything is being performed is not relevant to their laptops, but most of the competencies is done in the server level, which is being handled by the corporate environment, right? So these are certain things that you could also look when you're having your onboarding done in a remote level. Next is offboarding, right? So define your continuity processes. We may not be able to get the laptops as or the list of IT services that has been provided to the company back as that was happening previously. We may need a new process to be defined. For example, people may need to ship back their laptops and company may need to bear the cost of their shipping, or people may need to let's say come deliver the laptop in the corporate offices and go, not just the IT team would be able to do a checking, right? So all the continuity process has to be there. And most less contract with the employees not to access the company machine even if they have it, right? So you can work closely with the legal team, and you can also, if in case if you also have a remote data screening or let's say data wiping technology in place, it's always recommended that whenever employees off board, we take a backup of all the data and wipe the data so that the off-boarded employee is not accessing the data, right? So that's how remote wiping and that's how employee offboarding is something can be made seamless and can be made through uh, through even all these remote processes, right? Probably I'll also run you through few useful tips, probably one-liners. Now, during the BCP mode, all rules changes, all hands are in deck, right? So I call it this in this, there are no L1, L2, L3 teams, right? If we have a common forum where people could raise their issues, so people jump in for them to answer queries. That's what is necessary for a business to be in continued, right? Multiple modes of communication, extend the modes, encourage people to come through Slack where they get in Slack or MS Teams or any chat mediums where they get instantaneous responses. Although email or self-service portal is being encouraged all this while, now at this point of time, what's really important is instantaneous, and what is important is when employees, are they feeling secure and comfortable, right? And this is probably, I would say, the most important piece of all this, all the communication that I've did, all the content that I've delivered. Make sure that you add contextual tags. For example, BCP could be a tag for all the list of tickets that has been submitted during this case, right? This allows you to make sure that your next BCP is done in place. Next BCP can go through all the list of tickets that has been submitted, find out the list of tickets that has been submitted during BCP situations, and you make sure that you're ready when the next BCP happens. Yep. So that's going to be the last and final piece. Now, moving ahead, I'll quickly hand over the session to Yuvraj, who would be doing a quick fire right chat.
Thank you, Rahul.
Yep.
And thank you, Hunzaku, for two most powerful sessions that attendees and I were able to look at. Now we will quickly go to the next session. We have a surprise round, which we haven't mentioned in the registration page for the obvious reasons. So we have a quick fireside chat session where I'm going to ask our speakers some real life questions, some practical questions, which are being asked to the ITIL practitioners or to the the software product companies on how to adapt BCP. So if Rahul, if you can move to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So while I ask these questions, I request the attendees also to type their questions in the Q&A widget so that once the fireside chat session is over, we will ask both Gonzaku and Rahul to answer your questions. So now to the first question of the fireside chat session. Right. So this is one of the most searched question in Google, where after a major epidemic like COVID-19, will we be seeing an increase in number of organizations following or having a BCP? How frequently should such organization conduct mock drill to ensure preparedness? So maybe we can start with Gonzaku for this, because since he mentioned the crisis part and he covered the crisis part in detail, and then we come to Rahul, who can talk us about the BCP drill and everything.
Yeah, thank you for the questions. So typically for organizations that have put in place and they have a plan, so they will rehearse or they will conduct drill on a yearly basis. So depending on the size of the organizations, obviously they will have different scope, different budget for this. So you may not do a full drills, you maybe just do a partial ones, but typically you want to do this on a yearly basis. And I'll share my experience on in one of my customer. One of my customer was previously using a system, a single sign-on system, which enabled people to log into one applications and automatically log into others applications. And this system was critical to the organizations, because if this system goes down, nobody can access their normal applications, right? And so as part of the implementations, we actually put a redundancy. So we had an active and passive configurations, right? And as part of our projects, we actually train and document the recovery process to the customer. So if, for example, one of the server would have been down, this is what you should be able to do. You should get a new server, load the OS, load the applications, and then reloads come back to safe configurations with an active passive, right? And this had to be done on a yearly basis. One is to practice that actually the team knows how to do this and it's actually working, right? And unfortunately, this customer didn't follow our advice after maybe 1 or 2 years, and they call us back 4 or 5 years later because they had a hardware failure. And this was a huge risk with the organizations, because one of the server was down because of, and they didn't manage to recover it. And potentially, if the second server was going down, that meant that 2,000 people would not have been able to work. And they will have to revert back to a manual mode where they will have to distribute passwords basically on a manual basis. So the risk to the organizations was quite important. So this is why this kind of exercise, you must run this on a yearly basis.
Sure. Thank you, Gonzague. Rahul?
Absolutely. So even I'm in line with very much in line with Gonzague over here. So I think this should be an annual practice that has to be done on a yearly basis, right? Probably what could also help on a not yearly basis are probably certain things that can be again have some leverages that probably the checklist test that we are doing, or probably the recovery simulations test that we are doing can be done twice or thrice. Once in 2 or 3 years, right? But I would say the emergency evacuation drills or the walkthroughs of the BCPs has to be done on a yearly basis, and that's really critical, right? And I would take the word of ITIL force guiding principle over here. It's also progress iteratively after continuous feedback, right? So, and I think we would have got a lot of feedback about the current BCPs that we are all following. So it's really important that we progress iteratively based on the feedbacks that we get in these experiences.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul.
Yep.
Can we go to the next question?
Sure. Yeah. Yep. So how can small and medium-sized companies in Asia follow the best practice of BCP with minimal resources and funds? Right.
Can you go to the next slide, Rahul? Screen.
Oh, sorry, you're not able to see it?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. So yeah, Rahul, maybe you can start.
Yeah, probably I would also like to add up over here, right? So some of the things when it comes to really considerations of monetary aspects, or when it comes to resources and funds, is that one important thing is that the company, every company would have invested or would have at least planned for investments in different parts. For example, this is the strategy that that most companies did, and even including Freshworks, right? So we would have also did a lot of budgets plannings which has been done in field events, especially marketing events, and in travels which should be done planned across for a year, right? So these are things which are for sure will not be happening, right? So at least for considering the current situations, field marketing events, or let's say travels which has been to global offices for different employees, is something that will be restricted at least for some period of time. Now some of the piece of advice, or let's say best practice, that I could give is that rethink on the financial budgets that has been done by the company. Make sure to channelize all the travels or all the field events that has been planned for some of the most business critical items that we have seen in the as a part of the webinar, right? So that really matters. In fact, one of the very important piece is to or one of the very important item that we saw is to identify the core and the critical mission and allocate the appropriate resource that is being needed, right? So and this is very much important for small and medium sized companies, especially in Asia, but because understanding these companies, understanding the way in which these companies work, so realigning the entire budget and the financial strategy that is being taken by the companies is a really important thing that has to be done, right? Probably as a part of BCP, this may not be anywhere coined out or anywhere been pinpointed as a part of BCP, but this is, I think this should be a practice that has to be found within the BCP to reallocate and to redefine the strategies of the financial aspects for the companies.
Sure, Rahul. Thank you.
And probably Gonzagi could also add a better from his perspective.
Yeah, so for small and medium-sized company, effectively, the resource and funding can be a challenge. And I think on that, what my recommendation is usually is to look at your risk that you have identified, and you look at the key system that are supporting those, and define what are the priority, right? You have limited budgets, and you got to see, okay, out of the risk, which one is critical to my organizations that I must mitigate, and that's how you will basically make the decisions on which risk and which measure you need to take.
Sure. Thank you, Gonzagi. So we'll now move to the question and answer session. So Gonzagi, do you want to take the questions that you have already answered?
Yes, so there's a couple of questions that we had that I previously answered. So one of them was from Mariko regarding, said, how about unreliable internet connections? So that is effectively, that can be a challenge depending on your locations, your buildings, whether you work in a big city, in a small city. And here what I've seen growing is internet package with 4G, that people will go mobile. And so depending of course on the infrastructure where you are living in, that could be the best way to address this. Another one from Patrick was regarding the challenge and risk associated in the current events. And I'll say that in the current event, I would say the major risk is for business organizations, but for some of these business organizations is actually to go out of business. I have friends, for example, that were in the tourist industry, and they just closed their business because they know that for the next 6 to 9 months in Bangkok, there won't be any form of tourism, and they won't be able to survive in these environments. So they have not definitely closed the business, but they say that for the next 6 or 9 months, we're not going to operate at all, right? And so that could be your business, but that could be your partner business. So you may depend on partners, and the partners may be in a difficult situation. That will impact you because then it brings some of the risks to you. Okay. Another one. Okay, some issues. Okay. So another question from Patrick was regarding IT and information security. So we talk a lot about remote access, and some of this remote access. So Rahul mentioned, for example, virtual desktop. So not all organizations is whether they are ready or they have the skill set actually to set up virtual desktop. I've been working with organizations where it was already planned in their BCP to have a virtual desktop, but only for the executive. So there was only a small subset of the organizations that will have access to this, right? And so when you grant access, remote access from what I call non-managed assets, so the assets that don't belong to the organizations. Obviously, you increase your risk because you don't control the assets. So whether it's properly set up for antivirus, malware, how you set up the remote access, this effectively can have an impact on security, and that is something to look at very seriously. Another question from Ananias, which was really interesting, is how do we measure the effectivity of work from home? So how do we know where people are productive? And that is really interesting because I had this discussion just last week with one of the organizations where I do coaching, is that they realize that, so this is a company that do software development, and they realize that productivity had increased. And the way they look at productivity was how many issues or tickets or new functionality were developed on a daily basis. And they realize that people will close most of their tickets within the day, and they will develop the feature faster. And also people will be working less hours. So they will basically have more time to spend with the family instead of going early and leaving late. So if you live in Bangkok, you know how Bangkok traffic can be terrible. And by working from home, basically those people have basically gained maybe 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. So some people is even 3 hours of being stuck in traffic, where actually then they can reallocate this time. And they also can have more flexibility in managing their family time and their work time. And that enables people to be more productive. And this is something that is really interesting. So how to measure this is basically on the output. It's not how long you have been in the office. It's not whether you stay late. Is the outcome and the output of your work. And that's basically the way to measure this. So
awesome.
another question was the slides, so we'll share the slides. Yeah, how can you tell your colleague is they online or not? And here the answer is the question is not whether they are online or not. It doesn't matter. So I'll give you an example. I used to manage a consulting team across Southeast Asia. So I'm based in Bangkok, and I had people in Bangkok, I had people in Manila, I had people in Jakarta, I had people in Kuala Lumpur, and I don't see them. I don't know whether they are online or not. I don't know what they do. And one of my new staff was wondering how I was going to trust him, because I don't see him. And I said, the only way I can measure your work is whether the customer and whether the customer is happy, whether you are delivering the project. That's how I measure your work. It's not if you arrive at 8 o'clock in the office, I don't want you to be at 8 o'clock in the morning. You could be working from the office, you could be working from home, from the customer place, from the partner place, from the Starbucks. It doesn't really matter to me. To me is, can you deliver the work? And that's my only metrics. So whether people are there online or not, it doesn't really matter in my context.
Right. Kunzaki and Rahul, like we have some more questions. Do you want me to ask those questions so that we can answer?
Yep. That could also help.
Yep. So there's a question from Srini. He asks, how risk can be calculated, which is in the scope of PCB?
Yep. So Gunjagi, do you want to take this up? So you were speaking about the risk calculation, which is in the scope of PCP, right?
Yeah. So on this one, effectively is when you look at a BCP, is where do you define the perimeters? And here, what really you have to do is as part of your risk management process is you start with identification of the risk. Right, so you will do, and you can look at all the different type of risk. So here we mentioned the health risk, I mentioned the political risk, I mentioned the environmental risk. There may be also financial risk. For example, if you if there's a financial crisis, that could be part of the risk. And so you have to define what's the where are you going to stop, and then after days effectively on the size of your organizations, what are the you need to make an assessment how those risks will impact your business, and based on the size of your organization, which one you have to control, which one you can be controlling. That for example, if there is a financial risk, a lot of organizations, they can't do really much about it. Some large organizations, they can have currency aging, so they can compensate for this risk. But for a lot of organizations, they don't have the capacity. So in their action plan, they can indicate that yes, this is a risk, and the action is do nothing for this risk because we don't have the capacity, we don't have the means. So it's not that we ignore the risk. It doesn't mean that we don't need to monitor it, but we know that in our current situations, in the size of organization that we have, there's no action that we should be taking.
Sure. Thank you, Gunjaki. Right. So we have a very similar question on metrics part from Jerson Garpio. So I think Rahul can take this question.
Awesome.
Is there any metrics we can use to assess the most cost-effective BCP plan, scalable without sacrificing too much cost, so that we can be aware of not doing the planning too much?
Right. So speaking about metrics, right? So any metrics that we speak about over here are not just for BCP, right? So one of the common goal or one of the common view when it comes to looking at metrics is that any service that has been provided is being done for the customer, right? Let it be a service of a company to its end customers, or let it be IT team service which is being done to the employees, and sometimes to the end customers, right? So what really matters at the end of the day, what is the appropriate metric, or what is the universal goal metric that can calculate effectiveness of any plan, in fact BCP also including BCP, is that how satisfied are your customers are, right? So some of the very cost effective ways, some of the very easy ways to measure that is that for you to run surveys, understand how comfortable are people with the current BCP plans, how comfortable with the exact scenarios which are real time, which are happening. Is IT very approachable? Is the service desk really reachable? Or is communication between multiple teams done easily? Do we really need to implement a new chat platform, or do we really need to have a new communication platform, right? Now, these are things which can really tell you the effectiveness of your BCP plan. And one of the really important, or one of the really easiest ways to do is to do through customer satisfaction surveys, or which is the end user satisfaction surveys. So running around a survey, you will be able to find out the metrics, and how happy are your end users are is the real metric that you want to be looking at the end of the day, right? Now, apart from these surveys, other common practices that can be done, or practical items that could be done, is that managers or IT teams could have, whenever they get into troubleshooting sessions, whenever they get into business meetings for any help or any service, right? Before ending the service, or at the verge of the service getting ended, it's always very humanistic to ask, how do you like the service, right? Not just in the form of surveys, in matter of words, in matter of live communications, asking a word on how satisfied are people with the service that is being provided will for sure give you the metric, right? Documenting them will for sure give you how happy the customers are with the service, or with the BCPs that has been currently been taking place. So my answer is a very generic one, not just with regards to BCP, but also with regards to any metric that you want to be put for any process, is trying to measure how happy are your end users are, which will be the ultimate goal for any plan, any service.
Sure. Thank you, Rahul. Would you like to add?
No, a good answer from Rahul. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. So,
right. Other questions?
Right.
Yeah.
I have two more questions. we have like 10 more minutes, so we have 2 more questions. So I'll probably couple these 2 questions together. So there is a question from Efran. He asks, what is the best or recommended connectivity? VPN or third-party remote, like AnyDesk or TeamViewer? And there is a question also on
the applications,
Varel, which says sometimes VPNs are having issues due to many users who are connected. How can we overcome it? So both the questions deal with connectivity. So if you can answer.
Yep. Got it. So probably I'll let you know a quick one-liner of my thought over here, and I'll also add. I'll also let Gonzagi add his expertise over here, right? So there is no one right answer over here. So for certain organizations, it's VPN, and for certain organizations, it's third party. But what I have seen in the in past, in some of my experiences, that a combination of both works well. Right, so certain places where if you really feel that these services or these business processes has to be taken only within the company's network, and then you can go out with VPN for troubleshootings or for taking remote access, for solving end users questions or issues. I would it's always recommended to go with AnyDesk or TeamViewer or any third party remote tools, right? To me, I always strongly feel that a combination of VPN and third-party remote systems will be the recommended connectivity, and I don't feel there's VPN or third-party is a standalone answer for this question, right? So, Gonzagi, do you want to add up to it?
I have the same response on this. Effectively, some solutions require you to have a VPN, so to be part of the virtual networks to be able to access their applications. And for remote support of desktop, effectively these are solutions. I can say that my wife have accessed her desktop remotely like this when she was not able to access her office, for example.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you, Rahul and Gonzagi. So we have one more question from Merlin, which says, in this kind of crisis, besides from working home in our country, some people work from farm. Can IT help the farmers to communicate to the consumers so that they can also sell their goods even in this quarantine? So it's rather a business problem rather than an IT problem. So yeah.
Perfect. So I'll tell you how, probably I'll also add up my thought over here. Gonzagi, feel free to let me know your thoughts, right? So what can really be done is that, yes, for sure, there is always a solution for this. So we can also help people who are working from farm. Right now, one of the common practice that has been carried out really in India, which really works well, is that these farmers, or I would say the manufacturing people, right? The people who really is the source of all these items. It could be farm, it could be any other source of it could be food, or it could be any other source of items, right? So they really tie up with all the logistics company. For example, some of the common food delivering partners in India are Zomato, Swiggy, etc. Now, what these food delivery partners are doing is that they're not just delivering food, they're also delivering the groceries. They're also having a tie-up with the farmers. So they really speak to the farmers, get to deliver not just the cooked food, but also the raw vegetables, which are supposed to be delivered to the people. And creating tie-ups with, having a legal team influence over here, and creating tie-ups with different third-party vendors who really helps in logistics, can help to bridge the gap between the farmers who are there in the farm and the consumers who are there in the houses.
Yeah, just to add what Rahul just says, we had a similar situations here in Bangkok with the hotel. So the hotel, they had to close, but they still had their kitchen, and they had to change their business model. So you see in a kitchens, in a hotel, you have your restaurants, you serve to your guests. And then now you have to think, okay, how do I make use of the kitchen so that I can actually still get some form of revenue during this time, right? And so they had to be thinking about, okay, how do I first reinvent my menu, right? Because what I'm offering to guests in a restaurant and what people may buy as a takeaway online will be different, right? One example was in a restaurant, because of the venue, because of the atmosphere, you might be ready to pay a bit more for your fruit juice, right? But if you are ordering online, fruit juice is not what you had in mind, right? And so they both had to be thinking from a business side, okay, what my customer wants now if I offer takeaway. And then after to think, okay, from an IT perspective, what do I need to put in place? Okay, what is the logistics that I need? So I need something, I need a website, for example, for people to order, where I could display my menu. I could provide a mechanism, so it could be through messaging applications or through some form of ticketing for tracking orders. And then I need some things to track the delivery with my delivery partner, because the hotel are not going to do the delivery. So this is how some of the hotel has basically being able to continue to use their kitchens and keep the people employed by moving from the restaurants to the takeaway business. And those who have managed to do this the fastest is the one that have adopted an agile approach to this. Is basically experimenting, learning from the experiments, and then improving.
Thank you, Gonzague. Thank you, Rahul. I think that would be the end of the live Q&A sessions. I think we have answered most of the questions live, and we have answered some of the questions through the chat. And on the whole, I hope the session was really helpful for our attendees who have, waited more than 1 hour to listen to what you guys, what the speakers have to say. But there is not more information available about BCP, Business Continuity Plan, in IT domain. So I'm really glad that Freshworks was able to bring in such a topic with the help of Gonzague, who joined all the way from Bangkok, and Rahul from India. And as requested by many, we will be sharing the webinar recording and the presentation on demand. And if you have any questions, you can, feel free to ask us. You already have my email ID, and you can also see in the chat window, I have, texted the email IDs of both myself and Gonzague. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and we will be there for you guys. Until we see you in the next webinar, thank you, be safe, and take care of yourself.
Maybe we can just, on the last slide, we can mention to the people about the resources on risk management, because I think this is this can be useful. So I've put a list of resources that people could be interested. One is the management of risk. So that will help, that will explain the people on how to implement the risk management practice within their organizations. And then below there are 2 organizations that offer some form of certifications around risk management. I think you will find this useful. And otherwise, thank you for everyone. Thank you, Rahul and Johan on this seminar, and hope to see conduct another seminar soon.
Thank you, Gonzague.
Awesome. It was nice.
Thank you, Rahul.
Nice working with the seminar, guys.
Thank you, audience.
Perfect. Thank you so much. A lot of beautiful questions made the session more interactive. Bye-bye. Stay safe.